I woke up in the middle of the night, unable to sleep from morning sickness. Just as I was about to contact my husband, I stumbled across a post. "What's a secret you could never let your wife know?" The top liked comment was pinned. "She'll never know that the person who had sex with her on our wedding night wasn't me." The comments section exploded. "Dude, you have a cuckold fetish. Or, do you have erectile dysfunction?" The guy replied, "No. I just promised the woman I truly love that I'd never have sex with anyone else. She's been studying finance in the UK, and she's coming back tonight." A wave of nausea hit me. I felt even sicker. Out of curiosity, I clicked on the man's profile. A hand reaching out of a car window, wearing a distinctive diamond ring. I recognized it instantly. That was the wedding gift I gave my husband. Custom-made, one of a kind in the entire world. My mind went blank. I was about to call my husband to confront him, but then he suddenly sent me a message. "Jason Johnson, you used protection that night with my wife, right?" I frowned. Jason? The cold, ruthless heir of the Johnson family was the one who ravaged me all night? How was that possible? The message was quickly deleted. I pretended I hadn't seen it and hurriedly screenshot the post and profile, saving everything. Sure enough, when the post started trending, Nico Brown deleted his comment. But soon after, he couldn't help himself and posted his first status update. "Waiting for her." Two simple words, accompanied by a photo of the airport late at night, revealing Nico's anticipation. I sneered sarcastically and continued taking screenshots. So his working overtime was actually picking up his beloved mistress. I'd planned to tell him about the pregnancy tonight, but now there was no need. Without any hesitation, I immediately called my older brother. "Ian, find someone reliable and have them stake out the airport right now. Watch Nico." Silence on the other end for a few seconds, then a deep exhale. "He's cheating." "Yes. How dare he?" Ian's sleepiness vanished instantly. While arranging for someone to go to the airport, he growled in a low voice. I toyed with the diamond ring on my finger, speaking indifferently. "Since he doesn't care, let's just let the Brown group die completely." "Whatever you say." After hanging up, I felt drained of all energy and collapsed onto the bed. Nico's profile had already updated with a second post. This time it was the back of a young woman, paired with song lyrics. "Your gaze evaporates into clouds, then falls as rain. Only then can I draw near." Beneath it, disgusting men quickly piled on, egging him on. "Come on, bro. You still haven't sealed the deal? Go for it." Nico replied in real time. I couldn't bear it before. After all, I married a domineering nouveau riche. Didn't want her to get hurt. But now I'm not afraid of anything. No matter what, I can take half her money. Those men all praised his clever planning. They even asked him for advice. He pontificated in the comments about how easy it was to fool a brainless woman like me. I scoffed inwardly, looking at the illusory, dazzling light on my ring finger. "Huh, Nico. I'm afraid you don't know that I married you precisely because you're stupid." I opened the safe. I took out a thick file from inside. Walking to the floor-to-ceiling window, I looked out at the brightly lit skyscrapers outside. A cold laugh rose in my heart. "Nico, since you're heartless, don't blame me for being ruthless. Schedule an abortion for me. The sooner the better." Early the next morning, I called the top private hospital. Just after hanging up, my secretary rushed in to report. "Ma'am, Mr. Nico suddenly wants to use the wedding memorial hall to host a welcome party for a friend." "For whom?" "A Miss Penny," he said. "Penny." I thought for a few seconds, then suddenly laughed. So that's why Nico insisted on keeping the wedding venue. This was his plan all along, claiming he wanted to preserve our beautiful memories together. In reality, he wanted to throw a secret lavish wedding for his returning mistress. Too bad he couldn't afford the rental fee for the 8-star hotel ballroom. The permanent usage rights were in my hands alone. Tell him I don't agree. What gives you the right to disagree? The words had barely left my mouth when Nico burst through the door. He threw down the cheap packaging in his hand and began his interrogation. "Fiona, I'm your husband. Do I need to file a report to use a venue? And I even waited in line for 2 hours to buy you porridge." I glanced sideways at the completely cold fish porridge, a cold sneer forming at the corner of my mouth. The paparazzi had already sent me photos. This was just leftovers from the old restaurant where he and his mistress relived their student days. "Then I'd like to know what kind of big shot deserves to use my wedding venue." Nico blinked guiltily, unconsciously raising his voice. "Of course, someone 1,000 times better than you." "Oh." I raised my eyebrows playfully. "In that case, I'd like to see exactly who this person is." 2. The welcome party was scheduled for noon. As soon as I entered the venue, a young woman in a white dress came over. Anyone could see she and Nico were wearing matching outfits. How audacious. "Nico." She called out sweetly, and right in front of me, enthusiastically kissed Nico's cheek. Then she tightly hooked her arm through his and asked me provocatively, Miss Fiona, I've gotten used to being abroad. You don't mind, do you? Nico looked impatient, glancing at me with disgust. She's just a nouveau riche who didn't even finish high school. What would she understand? My face remained expressionless as I quietly flexed my wrist. And you are? The people standing around were all friends of Nico and Penny. Hearing me ask this, their voices were full of contempt. Her name is Penny. She's the daughter of Nico's family's housekeeper. They grew up together. Nico funded her to study abroad these past few years, which is how you got your chance. Hearing this, I laughed scornfully and removed the diamond ring from my finger. The housekeeper's daughter? No wonder even your schemes are so beneath contempt. My voice was neither loud nor soft, but enough for everyone to hear. Penny bit her lip awkwardly, and Nico's expression changed dramatically. Fiona, who are you looking down on? My gaze instantly turned sharp, and I slapped him without hesitation. The crisp sound echoed through the banquet hall for a long time. A housekeeper's daughter thinks she deserves to use my wedding venue for a welcome party? Nico, have you lost your mind? Nico covered his face in disbelief, trembling with rage. You're just a nouveau riche who got lucky. What are you so arrogant about? Don't forget, you're legally married to me. We didn't sign any prenuptial agreement, so I can take half of everything you have. He was confident, thinking he'd found my weakness. I laughed as if I'd heard a joke, sneering. Is that so? Then go ahead and try. I turned away dismissively. On my way out, I collided with a solid chest. The scent of warm sandalwood heated by body temperature filled my nose, incredibly familiar. I slowly looked up and saw that noble face. It was Jason. Are you all right? He steadied me, scorching warmth spreading from his palm. I was about to apologize when I heard Penny's shrill retort. So, what if I'm a housekeeper's daughter? It's still not your place to look down on me. Oh, then tell me, what kind of person am I? I suddenly became interested. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Penny chapped her wine glass, getting everyone to quiet down. I didn't want to broadcast this everywhere, but seeing Nico so humiliated, I have no choice but to speak up. I am the renowned stock market genius trader, codename Black Swan. After speaking, she proudly puffed out her chest. Gasps of surprise filled the room. Black Swan, the legendary trader who could shake the entire stock market. Unpredictable stock trades, ruthless execution, an undefeated career. Having her was like having a money tree, but Black Swan suddenly disappeared 2 years ago. How do you prove you're her? Someone at the table questioned. Penny smirked confidently and pulled out an exquisite velvet box from her bag. When she opened it, everyone nearly dropped their jaws. Inside was the gold coin gifted by the stock god himself. The engraved Black Swan on the back even had the stock god's personal fingerprint. Then she pulled out a gold embossed certificate and placed it on the glass turntable for everyone to examine. It was personally issued by the government, impossible to fake. This gold coin, I'm sure everyone here has heard of it. This should be proof enough of my identity. 3. When the coin turned to face me, I knew at a glance it was real. But how did it end up in her hands? Seeing me frown, Penny thought she'd gotten to me and became even more arrogant. Miss Fiona, this is me, climbing to the top of my industry, through my own efforts. And you? Besides your family's money, what else do you have? Hearing this, everyone around looked at me smugly, waiting for me to embarrass myself. After all, my high school expulsion was known throughout the city. Every teacher said they couldn't teach me. Everyone said I drove the teachers crazy, not knowing it was their own incompetence. Thinking about this, I suddenly found it strange. If Penny really got into that top finance university, how could she not have heard of me? My phone suddenly vibrated a few times. It was investigation materials from Ian. Before I even finished reading, I couldn't help but laugh. So that's how it was. I stood up unhurriedly and asked in a voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. What if I said I'm the Black Swan? The moment I spoke, the air suddenly went silent, then everyone burst into laughter. Penny laughed until her shoulders shook. Nico nearly rolled his eyes to the ceiling. Fiona, you didn't even finish high school. Do you even know what Black Swan is? How dare you spout nonsense? Hurry up and apologize to Penny, then pay the full venue fee, and we won't hold this against you. Just as everyone was laughing hysterically, a hoarse yet incredibly steady voice rang out. I believe her. Everyone looked over in unison, their pupils dilating in shock. It was Jason again. Had he lost his mind? His eyes were dark, staring at me with deep, burning intensity. As if afraid I hadn't heard clearly, he seriously repeated, I believe her. I believe Fiona is the Black Swan. I looked up and met his gaze. Fragments of that crazy wedding night flashed before my eyes. My face inexplicably began to heat up. I hurriedly turned away. Fine, you say you're the Black Swan. Then what can you use to prove it? Don't tell me you're going to pull out a gold coin too? Penny's lackeys started making trouble again, then deliberately laughed together with the people beside them. Nico didn't even bother pretending anymore, directly embracing Penny. After all, with the black swan who'd worry about cash flow problems. Fiona, can you stop being so stubborn? Hurry up, pay the money and get lost. Stop embarrassing yourself here. Go back and prepare a villa for Penny, or I'll divorce you. I raised my eyes slightly, still expressionless. What proof? How boring. Tomorrow morning when the stock market opens, we'll have a real showdown. Then we'll know who's the fake. Some people in the industry who knew me pulled at my sleeve worriedly, whispering advice. Miss Fiona, you don't even know what the stock market is. What kind of showdown can you have? You absolutely can't do this recklessly. You could lose money. Even if your family is incredibly wealthy, you can't afford to lose like this. Probably afraid I'd back out, Penny quickly stepped forward to agree. Fine, let's compete. But let me say this up front. If you lose everything, Nico will have to suffer with you. Before that happens, signing a divorce agreement shouldn't be a problem, right? As soon as Penny finished speaking, her friends immediately started making noise. Exactly. You want to kill yourself, but you can't drag others down with you. Stupid and malicious women are the worst. Divorce is the best risk mitigation. After hearing this, everyone else could barely stay seated. Everyone knew the Brown family begged for this marriage alliance precisely because they needed my financial help. Now that they'd finally latched onto this big tree, how could Nico possibly divorce? But the next second, Nico agreed without thinking. I agree. Those who didn't believe it before were instantly stunned. Are you sure? I crossed my arms in front of my chest, sneering as I asked him. He immediately answered, I'm sure. Fine. Then I want you to return all the funds I allocated to the Brown family immediately. Nico's arrogant expression froze on his face. The Brown family had begged for ages to get that funding. How could they just return it? Why should I? His expression turned ugly. Penny beside him couldn't help but remind him. Nico, she really is as dumb as a pig. She only knows to demand the funds back, but doesn't know to make you sign a marital property agreement. Divorcing now is actually good for you. Whether she dares show up tomorrow or not, you must take half her assets. That's right. Nico suddenly understood and immediately had the finance department return all the funds. Before the money even arrived, he loudly proclaimed to everyone, I ask everyone here to witness. From this moment on, Fiona has nothing to do with me. People below shook their heads and sighed, expressing sympathy for me. Only Jason stared at me with burning eyes. I stood up decisively, my heels clicking against the marble. The crisp sound was like another slap about to land on his face. Fine, I agree. The bet is now in effect. Tomorrow at the exchange, see you there. Penny looked triumphant. Don't be a coward tomorrow. The door slowly closed behind me. I couldn't hold back anymore and rushed to the bathroom, vomiting violently. When I looked up, a black silk handkerchief had somehow appeared beside my hand. I immediately turned around, but the doorway was empty, with no one in sight. Only a faint, lingering scent of sandalwood remained in the air. The bathroom of the 8-star hotel was cold, the polished gray marble reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights overhead. I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles turning white as another wave of nausea tore through me. I spat out the bitter taste of bile, rinsed my mouth with cold water, and pressed a damp paper towel to my forehead. The black silk handkerchief sat on the vanity. I picked it up. The fabric was heavy, high-grade mulberry silk, with a subtle, hand-stitched monogram in the corner, JJ. The scent of warm sandalwood clung to the threads, dry and grounding amidst the sterile smell of bleach and expensive hand soap. My fingers trembled slightly as I folded it and tucked it into my bag. Jason Johnson. On our wedding night, the penthouse suite had been completely dark. Nico had insisted on turning off all the lights, claiming he had prepared a sensory surprise for me. I had been exhausted, slightly tipsy from the champagne, and deeply trusting of the man I had just legally bound myself to. The man who held me that night had been intense, silent, and possessed a quiet desperation that I had mistaken for wedding night nerves. He hadn't spoken a single word, only letting out low, ragged breaths against my collarbone. Now, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place with a sickening click. Nico hadn't touched me. He had sold or traded that night to Jason. My phone vibrated in my palm. It was Ian. Fiona, I've got the preliminary background check on Penny Vance. My brother's voice was crisp, accompanied by the rustle of papers. She didn't study finance at LSE. She registered for a preparatory language course, skipped more than half the classes, and spent the stipend Nico sent her on high-end boutiques in Mayfair. But here's the interesting part. She was living with a man named Marcus Kane. Marcus Kane? I repeated, leaning against the cold marble wall. The former portfolio manager at Apex Trust? The very same. He was blacklisted from the London Stock Exchange 2 years ago for insider trading and document forgery. He had a collection of replica memorabilia, including counterfeit certificates from high-profile financial institutions. We believe he's the one who manufactured her Black Swan credentials. And the gold coin? I asked, my voice tightening. The Stock Gods coin has a registered weight and a specific micro-engraving on the rim. It's not something a street-level counterfeiter can easily replicate.
We're looking into that, Ian said.
But Fiona, are you sure you want to go through with the exchange tomorrow? If you expose yourself as the real Black Swan, the regulatory boards will look into your accounts. Your quiet life in the suburbs with Nico will be completely over. That life ended the moment I saw his post. I said quietly, if he wants a war of assets, I'll give him one. Did you contact the clinic? There was a pause on the line. The appointment is set for tomorrow afternoon, 2 p.m. after the market closes. Good. I'll see you at the exchange tomorrow. I hung up, took a deep breath, and walked out of the bathroom. The hallway was quiet, but as I turned the corner toward the private elevators, a tall figure stepped out of the shadow of the decorative pillars. Jason Johnson stood there, his hands casually tucked into the pockets of his tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was brushed back, exposing a sharp, angular forehead and eyes that seemed to absorb the light around them. He looked every bit the ruthless patriarch the media painted him to be. You look pale, he said. His voice was a low baritone, completely devoid of the mocking tone Nico usually employed. The seafood at my own venue didn't agree with me. I replied coldly, keeping my distance. Thank you for the handkerchief. Keep it, he said, taking a step closer. The scent of sandalwood drifted over. You shouldn't be driving in your condition. My driver can take you home. I can manage my own affairs, Mr. Johnson. I looked him dead in the eye, trying to find any trace of guilt, any sign of the man who had possessed me on my wedding night. But his face was an unreadable mask of aristocratic indifference. And I would appreciate it if you kept your distance. We aren't close. A subtle, almost imperceptible shadow passed over his eyes. We were close once, Fiona, even if you choose to forget it. That wasn't a choice I made. I snapped, my composure slipping for a fraction of a second. That was a transaction made behind my back by a coward and a thief. Jason didn't deny it. He merely watched me, his gaze dropping briefly to my abdomen before returning to my face. Nico is a fool who doesn't understand the value of what he holds. But don't underestimate Penny Vance. She doesn't have the mind of a traitor, but she has the backing of people who want to see your family fall. Then they can try their luck tomorrow, I said, stepping past him into the elevator. As the doors began to slide shut, Jason reached out, his gloved hand resting on the edge of the metal frame, halting the mechanism. Fiona, he said softly, his voice carrying an unexpected weight of sincerity. If you need liquidity tomorrow to squeeze them out, my accounts are open to you. I don't need your money, Mr. Johnson, I said, pressing the close button. I have my own. The doors closed, leaving me alone with the hum of the elevator and the rapid beating of my heart. The Metropolitan Financial Exchange was a cathedral of glass and steel, buzzing with the manic energy of hundreds of traders, analysts, and high-net-worth spectators. At 8:30 a.m., the VIP trading gallery was already packed. Nico and Penny had invited a small crowd of local journalists and members of the elite social circle, eager to witness the downfall of the arrogant nouveau riche. Nico was dressed in a flashy electric blue suit, his arm draped possessively over Penny's shoulders. Penny wore a white sheath dress, her hair styled in loose waves, the counterfeit gold coin dangling from a delicate gold chain around her neck like a trophy. Look who decided to show up. Nico sneered as I walked in, flanked by my legal counsel and Ian. I thought you'd be packing your bags for the suburbs, Fiona. The market hasn't opened yet, Nico. Save your breath for the margin calls, I said, taking my seat at the terminal opposite them. A neutral arbitrator from the exchange board stepped forward. The terms of this challenge have been registered. Both parties will trade on a designated high-volatility index using a starting liquidity of $10 million. The trader with the highest percentage return at the closing bell wins. In accordance with your private agreement, if Miss Fiona loses, she will sign the uncontested divorce papers and forfeit 50% of her personal real estate holdings. If Miss Penny loses, she signs an admission of fraud, and Nico returns every single cent of the intellectual property and corporate assets he moved out of my holding company over the last 12 months. I interrupted, my voice calm and steady. Nico laughed, a harsh, grating sound.
Agree.
Penny is the Black Swan. There's no way she loses to a high school dropout who spent her youth running wild.
Penny Smeagol, her fingers hovering over her keyboard.
Let's begin, Fiona. I'll show you what real education looks like. At exactly 9 a.m., the opening bell rang. The screens flickered to life, a chaotic waterfall of green and red numbers. The target stock for the morning was Biogenix Holdings, a pharmaceutical firm currently undergoing a highly controversial FDA review. Its stock price was hovering at $45.20, swinging wildly by the second. Penny immediately went to work. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced, albeit slightly stiff, speed. Buying 50,000 shares at 45.1, she muttered, her eyes locked on the chart. The momentum is upward. It's an easy long play. Within 10 minutes, the stock ticked up to $47.50. The crowd behind her cheered. She's already up over 100,000. One of Nico's friends whispered loudly. A genius. She reads the order book like a map. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting on my lap. My screen remained empty, the default chart ticking away. What's the matter, Fiona? Nico mocked, leaning over the divider. Don't know how to log in? Or are you waiting for your brother to do the math for you? Ian stepped forward, his face dark, but I raised a hand to stop him. The market is a noisy place, Nico, I said softly, eyes fixed on the depth of market data. The louder it is, the more errors people make. By 10:15 a.m., Biogenics had peaked at $52. Penny had accumulated a massive long position, her paper profit sitting at nearly $800,000. She looked over at me, her expression dripping with triumph. You've spent over an hour doing nothing, Penny said. Are you throwing the match? Not yet, I murmured. I looked at the order book. A series of large, block sell orders were being placed hidden within the dark pools, private forums for trading securities that are not accessible to the public. To an amateur, it looked like standard institutional rebalancing. But to me, the pattern was clear. The institutional investors were dumping their shares quietly before the public FDA announcement. The clinical trial data was about to be leaked, and it wasn't good. I opened my terminal. Instead of buying, I initiated a massive short position on Biogenics at $51.80, using the entirety of my $10 million allocation on 5x leverage. The system beeped, a warning flashing on the screen. High-risk trade. Exposure exceeds standard parameters. I clicked confirm without blinking. The room went dead silent. Is she insane? An onlooker whispered. She's shorting a stock that's on a massive bull run. She's going to get liquidated in minutes. Penny laughed out loud. You really are an idiot, Fiona. The FDA approval is practically guaranteed. Every major forum is talking about it. The forums are where institutions go to find their liquidity, I said, leaning back in my chair. They need sheep like you to buy their shares so they can exit their positions. Right on cue, at 10:45 a.m., a red banner flashed across the financial news ticker at the bottom of the screen. Biogenics clinical trials reveal severe side effects. FDA decision postponed. The reaction was instantaneous. The green candles on the Biogenics chart collapsed into a vertical red cliff. The price plunged from $52 to $38 in a matter of seconds. Penny's face went entirely white. Her paper profit vanished, replaced by a massive, flashing red deficit, negative $2,400,000. No, this is a temporary dip, she stammered, her fingers trembling as she tried to sell her shares, but the sell orders were backlogged. The market was locked in a downward spiral, and there were no buyers. Nico, what do I do? It won't let me sell. Double down. Nico yelled, panic creeping into his voice. Buy more at the bottom to average out your entry price. If she buys more now, she'll trigger an automatic margin liquidation. A quiet voice spoke from the back of the room. The crowd parted. Jason Johnson walked in, accompanied by two men in dark suits carrying leather briefcases. He didn't look at Nico or Penny. His eyes were fixed solely on me. She's already lost 70% of her collateral, Jason continued, standing at the edge of my terminal. A classic retail mistake. Shut up, Johnson. Nico snarled, sweat dripping down his collar. This is between my wife and us. Penny still has time. She has no time, I said, hitting the key to cover my short position at $32.10. The system calculated the transaction instantly. Fiona's account balance, $14,800,000, return, plus 48%. Penny's account balance, $2,100,000, return, minus 79%. The game is over, I said, closing the terminal window. But the real accounting is just beginning. Penny collapsed back into her chair, her hands shaking so violently she could barely keep them on her lap. The golden coin around her neck felt suddenly like a noose. This is a fluke, Nico screamed, slamming his hands onto the desk. You had inside information. You cheated, Fiona. I demand an investigation. An investigation is exactly what's going to happen, Mr. Brown. One of the men who had entered with Jason stepped forward. He pulled a badge from his pocket. I'm Agent Harris from the Securities and Exchange Commission, Financial Fraud Division. Nico froze, his jaw dropping. The SEC? We received a tip-off regarding unauthorized access to proprietary trading codes and the use of forged credentials to secure corporate loans, Agent Harris said, looking directly at Penny. Miss Vance, We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of financial impersonation, wire fraud, and grand larceny." "No," Penny shrieked, backing away from her desk. "I didn't do anything. Nico gave me the coin. He told me it belonged to his family."
What?
Nico stammered, his face turning an unsightly shade of gray.
Penny, what are you talking about?
"I found that coin in Fiona's old safe room. I thought. You thought you could steal my past and use it to build a future for your mistress," I said, standing up. I reached across the desk, grabbed the gold chain around Penny's neck, and snapped it with a single, sharp pull. I turned the coin over in my hand, pointing to the rim. The Stock Gods coin is registered with a unique laser-etched serial number on the microscopic scale, BS009. It corresponds to the license issued to the Black Swan in the year 2022. That license is registered under my legal name, Fiona Vance. I looked at Penny. "You didn't even bother to change your last name when you took my identity. Did you really think my father's old housekeeper's daughter could pass as a financial prodigy just by wearing a dress she couldn't afford?" The spectators in the room gasped. The murmurs rose like a tide, washing over Nico and Penny, drowning them in their own humiliation. So Fiona is the Black Swan. The Brown family is completely ruined. They returned all their liquidity to her company yesterday to get the divorce. Nico looked around the room, realization slowly dawning on him like a bucket of ice water. He had returned the funding. He had signed the agreement. He had publicly declared that I had nothing to do with him. "Fiona." Nico dropped to his knees, crawling toward me, his fingers reaching for the hem of my coat. "Fiona, please." I was confused. Penny seduced me. She lied to me. She told me she was the one who could help the Brown Group. "We're married, Fiona. We can work this out." The wedding night. We had such a beautiful night together, didn't we? A cold shudder ran down my spine at the mention of that night. I stepped back, avoiding his touch, as if he were diseased. "Don't touch her," a voice growled. Jason stepped between us, his massive frame completely blocking Nico from my view. His hand shot out, gripping Nico's collar and lifting him halfway off the floor with effortless, terrifying strength. "You have no right to speak to her," Jason said, his voice dangerously low, vibrating with a dark, suppressed rage. "And you certainly have no right to claim her wedding night." Nico's eyes widened as he looked up at Jason. "Jason, why are you doing this? What do you care about her? You're the heir of the Johnsons. She is the woman you sold," Jason said, his voice dropping to a whisper that only those of us close by could hear. "For 10% of the Johnson Group's logistics contract. Did you think I would let you keep the profit of that transaction after how you treated her?" Nico's breath hitched. He looked from Jason to me, his lips trembling as the final, most devastating truth began to piece itself together in his small, greedy mind. "It was you," Nico whispered. "The message, you were the one." "Yes," Jason said, throwing him back onto the floor like a piece of trash. "It was me. And unlike you, I don't leave my debts unpaid." The VIP room emptied quickly as the SEC agents escorted a sobbing Penny out in handcuffs. Nico was left sitting on the floor, surrounded by his remaining, silent legal team, staring blankly at the floor-to-ceiling windows. His empire was gone. His reputation was ashes. Ian walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'll handle the paperwork for the return of the Brown Group's assets. Go get some rest, Fiona. You look exhausted." "I have an appointment at 2 o'clock, I reminded him, my voice barely audible. "I know. I'll have the car ready." "No." Jason's voice cut through the quiet room. "I'll take her." Ian turned, his eyes narrowing as he faced the Johnson patriarch. "Mr. Johnson, you've done enough. My sister's business with your family is concluded." "It's not concluded," Jason said, his gaze fixed on me, raw and unyielding. "She deserves an explanation. And I deserve the chance to give it to her." I looked at Jason. The sandalwood scent, the dark, intense eyes that had haunted my dreams for months, the heavy silence of that dark bedroom. It was all here, standing in the bright light of day. "Ian," I said quietly, "wait for me at the clinic. I'll go with him." "Fiona." My brother protested. "It's fine. I need to hear this." We walked down to the basement parking lot in silence. Jason's Rolls-Royce was waiting, the driver standing at attention. Jason waved him off, opening the door for me himself. I climbed into the back seat, and he slid in beside me, maintaining a respectful distance but filling the cabin with his formidable presence. As the car pulled out into the chaotic traffic of the financial district, I turned to him. "Why?" I asked, the single word carrying the weight of all my confusion and anger. "Why would you agree to such a disgusting deal? You're Jason Johnson. You could have any woman in this city. Why did you take my husband's place on my wedding night?" Jason leaned his head back against the leather headrest, his eyes closed for a brief moment as if reliving a memory that pained him. Because I've loved you for 5 years, Fiona, he said softly. The confession was so unexpected, so completely out of character for the cold air of the Johnsons, that I could only stare at him in shock. 5 years ago, at the Zurich Financial Summit, Jason continued, his eyes opening, burning with a quiet intensity. You were 21. You had just executed the short on the European energy sector that earned you the name Black Swan. You stood on the terrace of the hotel, smoking a cigarette in the snow, wearing a ridiculous, oversized coat. I watched you for an hour. You didn't see me, but I knew I had met my match. He took a deep breath, his hands tightening on his knees. But then my father died and the family war broke out. I had to go to war to keep my position. By the time I returned, your family had arranged your marriage to Nico Brown to stabilize your father's failing shipping lines. I was too late. So you decided to buy me instead? I said, my voice rising with a sudden surge of bitterness. To take by force what you couldn't have legally? No, Jason said, turning to face me fully, his hand reaching out but stopping short of touching mine. Nico came to me. 2 days before the wedding, he came to my office with a proposal. He wanted the Johnson Group's logistics contract, a contract worth $50 million. In exchange, he offered to let me have my way with you on the wedding night. I felt a cold sweat break out across my neck. And you accepted. I accepted because he told me that if I didn't, he would sell the night to someone else. Jason's voice was dark, a dangerous edge returning to his tone. He was deeply in debt to a loan shark syndicate in the South District. He didn't care about you, Fiona. He was going to use you as currency to save himself. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let anyone else touch you. So you played the hero by violating my consent. I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and tears. You let me believe I was with my husband. I know, Jason said, his head bowing, his voice cracked with a genuine remorse that shook his entire frame. It was the most selfish, cowardly thing I have ever done. I wanted to tell you. Every single day of the past year, I wanted to drag you away from that fool. But I knew you'd hate me. I knew that if you knew the truth, you'd look at me with the exact expression you're wearing right now. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small, velvet pouch. He opened it, revealing the matching diamond ring, the one I had given Nico as a wedding gift. He threw this on my desk the next morning, Jason said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Like it was a tip for services rendered. I've kept it ever since. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of my own sin. I looked at the ring, then at his face. The cold, ruthless air of the Johnson family looked, in this moment, like a man waiting for his execution. I don't expect you to forgive me, Fiona, he said. I don't even expect you to let me be near you. But the child you are carrying, it's not Nico's. It's mine. The car came to a smooth stop. I looked out the window. We had arrived at the private clinic. The waiting room of the private clinic was peaceful, smelling of lavender and expensive wood polish. Ian was already there, pacing the floor, but he stopped when he saw us enter together. Fiona, Ian said, walking over to support me. He glared at Jason. Mr. Johnson, your business here is done. Jason stood by the entrance, his long shadow stretching across the soft carpet. I'll wait outside. No need, I said, my voice steadying. You should come in. Ian looked at me in disbelief. Fiona, are you sure? Yes. The doctor, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, called my name. We walked into the examination room. The walls were lined with anatomical charts and soft, muted paintings of landscapes. Miss Vance, the doctor said, reviewing her tablet. You're here for the termination procedure. We've completed your blood work, and your vitals are stable. However, as required by clinic policy, we need to perform one final ultrasound to confirm the gestational age before we proceed. I lay down on the examination table, the cold gel against my stomach, making me shiver. Jason stood in the corner of the room, his eyes fixed on the floor, his hands clenched into fists. He looked completely out of place in this room of life and medicine, a creature of the dark boardroom forced into the light of human vulnerability. The monitor flickered to life. A small, rhythmic pulsing sound filled the quiet room, the steady, rapid beat of a tiny heart. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. The sound was incredibly loud in the silence of the room. It wasn't just a medical metric, it was a life, vibrant and clear, completely innocent of the greed, betrayal, and violence that had surrounded its conception. The fetus is 8 weeks old, the doctor said softly. The heartbeat is strong and regular. Everything is perfectly healthy. I looked at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. For the past 12 hours, I had thought of this pregnancy as a parasite, a physical manifestation of Nico's deceit, a chain that would bind me to a family of thieves forever. But it wasn't Nico's. It was the product of a night of dark, silent passion with a man who had loved me in secret for 5 years, a man who had soiled his own hands to protect me from a worse fate. I looked over at Jason. His eyes were locked on the monitor, his pupils dilated, his lips slightly parted. A single, silent tear slid down his sharp cheekbone, disappearing into the collar of his shirt. He looked terrified, not of the legal consequences or of the scandal, but of the sheer, fragile beauty of the sound echoing through the room. "Fiona," he whispered, his voice cracking. If you want to go through with this, I will support you. I will pay for the best doctors, the best recovery care. I won't blame you. But please, know that if you keep it, I will spend the rest of my life making sure neither of you ever has to face another cold day again." I looked back at the screen, then closed my eyes. The image of Nico's mocking face, of Penny's cheap triumph, of the years I had spent hiding my genius to play the role of the dutiful, quiet wife, it all dissolved, washed away by the steady rhythm of the heartbeat on the monitor. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the black swan. I was Fiona Vance. And this child was mine. "Doctor," I said, my voice clear and resonant. "Cancel the procedure." The doctor smiled gently, wiping the gel from my stomach. "Are you sure, Miss Vance?" "I'm sure," I said, sitting up and looking at Jason. "But I have some conditions." 3 months later, the dust had finally settled over the financial capital. The Brown Group had declared bankruptcy, its assets liquidated to pay off the massive regulatory fines, and the debts were called by my holding company. Nico Brown had been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for corporate theft and document forgery. His father had been forced to sell their family home to cover the legal fees. Penny Vance's trial was still ongoing, but her career as a financial genius was dead, replaced by the mockery of the internet. The Black Swan had returned to the market, but not as a ghost. I sat in the penthouse office of Vance Holdings, looking out at the city skyline. My stomach had begun to show a slight, neat curve beneath my high-waisted trousers. The door to the office opened, and Jason walked in. He had shed his formal jacket, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, carrying a thermal flask of ginger tea that my doctor had recommended for my lingering morning sickness. "You've been staring at the Nikkei index for 3 hours, he said, setting the cup on my desk and resting his hands on the back of my chair. "The doctor said you need to limit your screen time to 6 hours a day." "I was just watching the final restructuring of the Brown Group's logistics division," I said, taking a sip of the warm, spicy tea. "Your family's company bought it for pennies on the dollar this morning." "We did," Jason murmured, his fingers gently brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His touch was warm, no longer carrying the desperate tension of our wedding night, but a steady, quiet confidence. "I'll have the transfer papers for your 50% stake ready by Monday." 50%. I raised an eyebrow, looking up at him. "I thought you were a ruthless businessman, Mr. Johnson." "I am," he said, a rare, soft smile touching the corners of his mouth as he looked down at my stomach. "But I'm also a father who knows when he's met his match." I reached out, my fingers wrapping around his wrist, feeling the strong, steady pulse beneath his skin. We had a long way to go. The scars of our beginning would never fully disappear, and the world would always look at us with curiosity and suspicion. But as I listened to the quiet hum of the city below and felt the warmth of his hand over mine, I knew that for the first time in my life, I wasn't just trading on the margins of someone else's game. I was writing my own ledger.